Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all y'all ships at sea. Let's go to press. Today, instead of coming from the bunker, I come from the beautiful, gorgeous spring day here in Brooklyn, New York. Apparently it's the only nice day we're going to have. Tomorrow's going to be rainy again, so I want to get out here while the sun was still out. Enjoy some of this beautiful nature. Look at all this stuff happening around. Trees and billowing bushes and such. And there's a dang Cheeto in the White House. There's a goddamn Cheeto in the White House. There's a worldwide pandemic, economic collapse in a way that like the post Keynesian economy, world economy has never had to deal with. Kim Jong-un might be dead, and there's a goddamn Cheeto in the White House. How the hell are you supposed to make sense of it? How do you make sense of it, Ed Tom? It's goddamn beyond everything. It's goddamn beyond everything, Ed Tom. It isn't the one thing. It's a dismal tide. Not the one thing. Not the one thing. The evening redness of the West. How you guys doing? Someone says fuck me for streaming right now? Why would I want to stream any other time? Look at this. The sun is literally in my face, for God's sake. I don't know how much longer that's going to last. I hate edibles because you can never guarantee what you're going to get or like how long it's going to last. I hate all that. Edibles are for like when you go into a movie or something and you have to, you know, you're going to be out of the house. Like edibles, I don't understand the point of edibles in quarantine. I guess like to get surprised by yourself. Like, oh shit, I'm way higher than I thought I was. I guess. I don't know. I've only been smoking. But I'm also have other things other than acid, or I'm sorry, other than weed that might be contributing. I'm trying to crossfade, I guess you call it. I gotta say, I'm drinking a lot less than I used to, like alcohol. So, you know, if something's got to give, I'd rather it be booze. I don't know if microdosing is the word for it. How you guys doing, man? How you guys living in this year of the Cheeto? Animo Cheetone. Would that be it? Animo Cheetone. AC. The year of the Cheeto. The year of the Frito-Lay Cheeto product. Like we're in a goddamn David Foster Wallace book. And the thing is that you may make fun of Wallace all you want, but he got it. He knew it was coming more than anyone. He knew it was coming. He saw it. The year of the subsidized time. I mean, there's no figure in especially right around the turn of the millennium. There's no figure in science fiction or literary fiction that heralded Trump more than Johnny Gentle, famous crooner, the nonpartisan president of the Onan Confederation that would rule near future America in Infinite Jest. The thing about like people hating David Foster Wallace basically happened because like guys have always I hate to sound too red pill here, but this is just a fact. Is that like you know there are certain strategies for attracting women that certain men adopt, and ones who aren't physically capable of doing so use Use their wiring, their wits and what have you. Their fuck. Basically, what I'm saying is that you goof on the jocks with like the art girls, but eventually the jocks aren't there anymore. It's just you and the art girls in Brooklyn. So now what do you do? Like, you know, none of you know how to play football. None of you could change a tire. So who's the jock? Who's the scary masculine guy that you can convince the more anxious of your female friends that you're not like? Well, he beats David Foster Wallace. It gets pretty sad. Like they're really, that's like when they're going after when they're making it being bro-like to read a book that a 1,500-page book, then those terms have been destroyed of meaning. Those terms don't mean anything. If reading a 1,500-page book makes you a bro, then the bro doesn't mean anything. It's a totally relative term that's just used as a way to distinguish yourself. Anyway, Infinite Jest. He got what was coming. He got what he got like the psychological interiority that late capitalism produced better than anybody, in my opinion. And you might say, well, that's because you're a white male. And it's like, yeah, probably, because he was too. And that's part of the reality of it. Like the part of that like maddening, generalizable, but then also so like neurotically and specifically individuated, so that like I can think it's totally my own, and also feel it's universal, because that's the way that reflects the same facets of capitalism. It's in malleability and customizability. So that state of mind, I think he gets at better than anyone. But of course, it's filtered through the mind of a white male dude bro. So white male dude bros read it and they get that, I think, more readily because they have fewer. They don't have to translate it. It's straight. It's like reading something in its original language as opposed to a translation, or having to do the translation to yourself from a second language. Like, that's the difference. Yeah. I think that is it. So yeah. So DFW stands for dudes fucking winning. No, he wasn't a genius about everything. I like the fact that he wrote like that mathematics book and like all mathematics say no. He was a moron. He had no idea what he was talking about. Like, but because it's mathematics, and like, that's the kind of thing because that's the thing that made him a genius to these. Because like the thing about people like me is, at the end of the day, and I think this is almost universally true. Gun to the head, people like me who like maybe know a little bit about history, maybe have a little bit of a ability to like synthesize concepts. Maybe they can recall ideas. Maybe they can maybe they can bring a bit of insight into a text. That maybe you couldn't if you were reading it. We all think, and if there's anybody who thinks that they're like me in this and disagrees, you can fucking take it up with me, because I won't. I mean, I don't know if I'll ever believe you. I'll think you're lying. Who doesn't think that like hard science intelligence, people with that are like smarter than they are. And so the fact that he was this, consummate indoor theater kid, but also kind of a jock a little bit, and then also a scientist, a real smart person. Come on, that's he's literally like creating himself as like the ideal version of the late American male that synthesizes everything that came before, like the dialectical embodiment of the late American white male. Like, that's what he was. And that but the thing is what I'm saying, the joke of that is that he wasn't actually very good at mathematics, according to actual mathematicians. And I have no way of judging what they say, but people who are smart in math say, no, his math was terrible. And that, like, all of his books on hard math are riddled with errors that are very basic. And I just, like, that's another thing, like the Paddock shooting. I don't know if that's true, and I never will, because I don't know how to count. I can't count on my finger. I need my fingers to count. I'm not kidding. Like, no, I won't say that. But I'm basically can't do math, like beyond what's asked of my fingers. So I have no idea if he knew what he was talking about. The people who know what they're talking about say he didn't know what he was talking about. Anyway. But anyway, that's why he was like, he was the full spectrum. He was the embodied man. You know, he was the man in full. Hilariously, like it's kind of funny that that Tom Wolfe wrote a book in that exact same time period that's about the same phenomenon that he called a man in full, but because of course he was writing it from the perspective of the fucking boomers, it didn't capture it because, you know, he couldn't translate the moment. But you could have called him that. Like a biography of him could have been called that. Instead of whatever the hell what did the name of that biography of him ended up being called? Like a ghost story as a love story or whatever the fuck? No. People were talking smack about me on the Tom Pynchon subreddit. What? What? Because I read it? Because I read Against the Day? I've only said good things about Pynchon. I don't understand why they'd be mad at me. And I have not claimed a knowledge about Pynchon that is above my station, which is, I'm sure, what they really get mad about. Is anybody referencing Pynchon that doesn't understand it at the level that they do? Which, of course, you know, that's up for them to decide. I would never make that claim. But I don't know. So I never said anything bad about Pynchon. And I read a part of Against the Day, which is like an underread Pynchon book, I kind of think, that I think is really good. And, like, just a good piece of writing. So how did I offend the Pynchon people? Or if someone would ask me, I'm just curious. I mean, I don't really care. They're fucking the same, you know. It's basically like, why are the MLs mad at me or whatever the fuck? Why are the anarcho-communists mad at me? It's like, it's all the same thing. It's like being in the Pynchon subreddit. It's all just book clubs. They don't like me. Well, fuck them. Suck my dick. That's my answer. You can read Pynchon or you can watch this fucking live stream. Which one are you doing? Which one of you motherfuckers is reading Gravity Rainbow right now instead of watching me? The answer is 0. And that's true even though there's a goddamn Cheeto in the White House. They don't like how I get twisted. Well, I mean, some people can't handle the twistedness. I think John Collins, my friend John Collins, is the person I trust most to tell me what Pynchon means. He seems like he vibes it. And Corpse in Orbit on Twitter, of course, him too. Those are my and Boris and yeah, those guys are my consigliaries on Pynchon. Oh no, not the Vash, not the pipeline guys. Yeah, why haven't you talked enough about the Chapo to Pynchon pipeline? Because that's got to be a thing, right? At least one person has felt like they were required to. I know. I literally, from being on the show, the only reason I've ever read Dune. I know Dune is not as good as anything by Pynchon by a million years, but it's almost as hard to read as Pynchon is because of how like just clunky and poorly put together it is as prose. But I read the fucking thing because I was sick of not getting the references that him and Will were making. Felix and Will kept just talking about. Shouldn't shut the fuck up about like Duke Atreides and the sleeper being awakening. I'm like, all right, this is what the fuck's going on. Like, I only knew from that awful fucking David Lynch movie that didn't even make sense. So I read the whole fucking book, the first one. I'm not going to read the rest of it. I'll just go with the Wikipedia summaries from that one. Prose was so sloggy, but what I'm saying is literally just being on the show made me read that awful book. So I got to believe at least one person has read Pynchon because they've listened to the show, which means that there is if someone would say that, if I could get one person to say, yeah, I wanted to get a reference or something, or someone made a recommendation, so I read a Pynchon book. If someone says that, and they could like, even if you just had like a screenshot of a Pynchon book, that would be more of a real pipeline than the Chapo to Fash pipeline, which these people imagine exists and have never shown example. I don't want to dig this back up again because I mean, obviously, this was not a close contest. This is a destruction. There's no need to be ungentlemanly about it, but it is funny that if I had to, I would have an easier time making an empirical argument for the existence of a There's certainly a Chapo to Dune pipeline, but that's sort of obvious and easy because, like I said, you can just read the Wikipedia pages. Ooh. Shit. shouldn't have done that. Oh well. Oh boy. How you guys doing? Alright, this is an interesting one. If you could go back in time and kill any one person, who would they be? I mean, you can't just say who, obviously, because you have to say when. I mean, we just talked about Assassin 33 for that very reason. Killing Hitler, or killing baby Jesus, is way different than killing Jesus on the cross. It's way different than killing Jesus in the garden. So the question is when and who. I don't know. It's hard to imagine any one person affecting anything enough to be meaningful. So it has to matter to you, like not in the longue durée, right? Because the fact is, it's like, if you go by the longue durée, nobody's individual preference for any one outcome over another should be privileged. Because how could it stack up in the weight of time? It has to be privileged by its present situation, by the acuteness of it as a sensation, right? Like that's it, you know. That's a utilitarian observation that can't be denied. I mean, I understand that you could have like a religious disinclination to believe that, you know, if you believe in ancestor worship or whatever. But the reality is that present feelings, emotions, are more real to us than both abstracted away from us in person and in time. So I don't know. I can't. It's hard to. So it would have to be. Well, basically, this is my way of saying it would have to be somebody in my very near timeline. Because on the long, could you really ask, in the long stretch, if you really pulled back and examined this moment in history, the way that most of us who aren't like very specific historians of specific moments, the way we regard history with the same sweep, the way that we view, like say something, the way that what we freight with just the words the Ottoman Empire or the Roman Empire for that matter. How much time that word, that phrase, in our head, what that means, the amount of time and space, the amount of human lives that encompasses, and then in that mental little nugget. Imagine we're in that same nugget for someone else. Thinking about, like, you know, who stopped Hitler from taking power, or didn't stop Hitler, or the Battle of Tours, or if only Hitler had been killed, or whatever the fuck. Like, any of it would matter in the long scheme. No, because those things are determined by forces beyond any of our individual reckoning. The longue durée. Periods are in our mind. We create pyramids out of chaos. The longue durée is the only reality, or the only thing close. It's the white whale. It's recognition of the other. That's it. That's the only reality. That's the only real thing, and that's the thing that haunts all of our moments on Earth. And that's what's represented by the Pacific Ocean, by Moby Dick, by Judge Holden. It's the recognition of the other. It's the only real thing. Everything else is just intellectualizing around that. Just building sediment around it. Oh boy. How you guys doing? Let's see what's going on. I don't know if I'm being very helpful today. Oh man, these questions are so interesting because they go from such a fucking gamut, from like very specific small bore political questions to shit like, you know, questions of essential nature and like questions that ask you deeply to reckon with who you are. And then shit like, oh, do you think Biden's going to follow through on his Medicare pledge or whatever the fuck? Oh boy. There's a goddamn Cheeto in the White House. How are you supposed to deal with that? There's a goddamn Cheeto, guys. Why there were so many serial killers in the 70s? That is really the interesting question, isn't it? And what it is it's why were there serial killers in the 1980s or in the 1890s? Why were there serial killers in the Victorian era? It's just hinge points. It's where the hinges start moving, things start rubbing against each other. Things start popping off like bits of accumulated calcium and rust. See, people assuming Trump's going to win, hilarious to me. He could absolutely lose. In fact, at this point, I would put money on him losing. I mean, I wouldn't put a lot of money on it, and I probably wouldn't get very good odds, but I'd put money on him losing. I don't know, maybe I'd get good odds, depending on how convinced people are that, because of how obviously terrible Biden is, that Trump must get reelected. It's like, I mean, if this hadn't happened, and we were still cruising, and like, you know, the Fed was still weekend at Bernie'sing the American economy across the finish line, which it would want to do. You know, it's liked having Trump as president. It doesn't really see any. Why change horses in midstream from the point of view of capital? That means that all the right levers have been held, and like, you don't have to worry that they're going to pull the rug out from under you the way that the Fed did against poor Richard Nixon in 1960. Well, I mean, you could say like the proximate reason Nixon lost in '60 is because the Fed refused to do short-term interest rate shit to stop the 1958. 58-59 recession, and he always that was one of the Eastern establishments that conspired against him with their pretty boy JFK, and that's why he was so free when he was in office to do whatever it took to fucking cook the books, and was willing to go off the fucking gold standard for once and all, and end the Bretton Woods system and float the currency. But anyway, what I'm saying is that those same Fed forces that have been keeping things going, they'd be fine with Trump being president. And so, you know, the Joe Biden we have, sex predator, senile monster, living mummy, corrupt Dracula, he would lose. But this is an unprecedented situation. And if people blame this motherfucker for what's happened, and with him going out in public and telling people to inject fucking bleach into their bodies, it's like you can say whatever you want about what he actually said, you can say whatever you want about the media and how they are out to get him, which is true, but I'm sorry, you watch the video of that, and that is what is indicting. And I think that's one of the reasons that this actually punched. I don't agree with Paul Krugman that this is the moment people turn around. Shut up. He's an idiot. But what I think, because what his followers think of him is, I think, beyond the ken of anybody in New York, and like presuming to say anything is fraudulent. But what they can say, I think, because they're easy, they can understand Trump. Like a lot of these East Coast people, I think the reason that they fuck up in talking about Trump and understanding Trump is because they second guess themselves, because they get Trump because he's one of them. But then the fact that he has all these regular Americans who they don't understand and are scared of, but on his side, it makes them second guess themselves. And then they start like, oh, I don't know. Is he really? What do you think? No, he is. It's just because of the fucking literal idiot box we put in front of people for fucking 20 hours a day. Their brains have been turned into fucking Velveeta. You know, that's it. You don't have to like try to second guess yourself. But anyway, what that means is that you can see in his face when he goes out there and says, yeah, inject the chlorine, put the bleach under your skin, and then has to come out and say, no, I was kidding. Now they're saying he's going to not do he was loving those things. Every day, getting the bebop and scat, that's his whole milieu. That's the only thing he likes about being president, is the cameras on him and riffing. Everything else sucks, and he hates it. Being in meetings and signing things, he hates. But having the cameras on and him talking in front of, especially a crowd of rubes, lapping it all up, he loves that. And in a room, and he can't do that anymore. He can't get like, you can't get the crowds to give him back his mana. So it's just this room full of East Coast, rootless cosmopolitans, just giving him the old, giving him the same jaundiced eye they would have given him at, across the table, across the floor at Sardi's or whatever the fuck, or like at the Vanity Fair party. They would give him the same, like, ugh. But because he's got those guys with him, it's like, I don't know. It's like the fucking Hells Angels showed up. But anyway, this is all a way to say people might start blaming him for this. If his only response is drink bleach, then people are going to be like, even the Mumra man, even the fucking the mummy man, the rape mummy man. At least he's got a party behind him that maybe will have more of an idea of what to do than the people who just let this asshole go on TV for 4 hours a day and say maybe drink bleach. So that's why I say anybody who says Trump's gonna win, I think they've kind of allowed him to hypnotize them a little bit. But I mean, it doesn't mean they're gonna lose either. The people who obviously that we assume. I'm saying going the other way is also incorrect. How can you say this election is going to happen if it's going to happen? It's beyond my confidence. I'm not going to give money on whether the election happens, let alone either way who would win. Ah, shit. I will reiterate, somebody asked me about Jesse Ventura. I'm going to reiterate a little bit on Jesse Ventura, and then I'll talk about the Kims. Jesse Ventura. Presidential election doesn't matter. He is methadone. I said this on the Assassin 33 episode, but I think we cut it, so I want to say it here then, and maybe I'll say it on the next episode I'm on, because I really want to get this across. It's like, yeah, I was saying, sure, vote for Jesse Ventura. People freak out. They're like, well, he's not a socialist. And if you're going to go third party, well, Howie Hawkins is a real trade unionist. And Gloria Reliva is part of a party, so socialism liberation connected to, real Marxist-Leninist. It's like, stop it. That's the nonsense talk and crank idiocy. That's the organ grinder's monkey wheel of electoral politics. It gets all of that's all the most earnest-minded cranks to get along with it. You gotta ignore that sound. Like, you have to be willing to not dance when the tune is played. And a lot of people, that's hard because you want to move your hips. So you want to get down there. And when Bernie was a possibility, everyone was in the pit. They were going nuts because those fucking rules. But when he's out of there, I'm sorry, it's not worth dancing. You should just do something else. You honestly should do anything else, including think about what the fuck we're going to do about this, because these elections aren't going to have anything to do with it. It's all going to be us. So maybe don't give a shit about this at all. This is literally a distraction. So if you are going to have to take some of that mana you were putting into the presidential election, you can't just turn it off. That's blue balls. You have to be able to manage that declension. You have to be able to manage the osmosis, the pure energy level transfer of that. And if you want to do that, a vessel to hold your excess orgone energy there could be Jesse Ventura. Because he's cool. He's a pimp. He was actually a kind of effective governor of the state of Minnesota. He got a light rail through in the Twin Cities, which is way more than Jim Doyle could say in Wisconsin. That guy was he was a two-term Democratic governor before Walker, and he didn't fucking get light rail through in 2 terms. And what I think matters most is that one of the reasons Bernie was a vehicle was because he was a media identity, and you need to get people through their understanding of themselves and the world. And I'm sorry, it's the media. We don't want that to be the case, but it is the case. We have to acknowledge the reality of media, and so that means we have this phenomenon that we can deal with. It's that's why all third party shit, Gloria Riva or Howie Hawkins, no. This is just for you. This is for you. This is not for them. It has to be for them. And Bernie was for them. And Jesse Ventura, hypothetically, not in this world, but in another world, things are a little different. Jesse Ventura could be. Absolutely. Just like Arnold Schwarzenegger could have been if the fucking stupid Constitution had been written differently. Do you think Donald Trump beats Arnold Schwarzenegger? He maybe beats him in a primary. But seriously, Schwarzenegger could have run as a Democrat in 2016 and annihilated Trump. He would have won the nomination, and he would have destroyed Trump. Does anyone want to doubt any of that? Anyone? I mean, I know counterfactuals are stupid, but come on. If Schwarzenegger changes registration, changes to Democrat, runs against Hillary, runs in the general, destroys it. And what I'm saying is, like, that didn't happen, and there's a lot of reasons that it, not just the Constitution that didn't happen, but things a little differently, that could happen. Things a little differently, Jesse Ventura could happen. Acting like any of this is outside of reality is silly at this point. But, like I said, this is just a fun brain thing to do, to give yourself something to do that used to be concentrating on the presidential election. It's not like you were trying to fuck to make a baby there. Like a little, I don't know, whatever you wanted to call it. We haven't found a name for it yet. Maybe a little social democracy baby. But other people are like, actually, no, foolish sockdam. Inside this social democracy baby you think you're incubating is actually a workers, working class baby who's going to, from the inners of insufficient social democracy, will burst forth this new class mobilization baby, and then that will create communism. Whatever the fuck. You thought you were going to create something out of that. This is sterile. This is nutting into a sock. And that's fine. Sometimes you got to nut into a sock, but that's it. You're jacking off. And that's what we should recognize all electoral post-Bernie politics as, and specifically whether or not you want to say, for meme purposes and as a blow-off of steam, that Jesse Ventura is epic and root for him. Because, one, those things are not non-significant factors of politics. I think you can't acknowledge now, you could not deny now that those things have real power. Whatever material reality is generating them and determines them, they have at like at the point of like determining narrow outcomes. They absolutely have influence. So like, as a way and as a way to think about power, as a way to think about the media and its relationship to politics, the way it relates to like the difference between a performer and a politician, like understanding that difference and like utilizing different facets of celebrity for different political ends. All of those things can be interrogated through the Jesse Ventura for President concept, which is why, as a place for your excess enthusiasms, as I guess they used to say in the 19th century, have a little fun with Jesse. I will be. I have to do more than most because this is literally my job, as absurd and ridiculous and short-lived as that might be. And before anyone thinks that means, oh, he's saying that Chapo's going away, it's like, I mean, who knows what's not going away? It's not about the show. It's about how, like, it only exists in a certain economic context that might not exist in the near future. But either way, that could be good. Like, what if it is war communism, you know? What if we do get, like, a fucking carnation revolution? I would be happy to do that. I would absolutely give this stupid life up. Go up to the fucking I mean, I literally am disabled. That's funny. Like, I never pulled a card, and it's not on my bio, and I hate that politics of it, but I literally am disabled. If anyone has met me, they know that I'm not physically able, so I'm not going to be able to, hoe as many acres of potatoes as maybe somebody else, but whatever you need me to do, I would do, and I'd be happy to do it. If anyone wanted to do anything that is within my physical ability, I would do it. I do not demand to be anime appraiser. I swear to God, I do not demand to be anime appraiser. I will do some actual physical labor. Pushing booty pencils? What's the matter, Cohegan? I think I actually answered this question about my favorite Ottoman Sultan before, but I'll do it again. Selim the Grim. I feel like he gets wildly underrated, considering he doubled the size of the Ottoman Empire in an 8-year period. That's I mean, come on, that's amazing. And it was consolidated too. It's not like with Trajan. Like, yeah, Trajan took the Roman Empire to its farthest extent, but they started trimming that immediately. I mean, Hadrian's Wall was put up after Trajan conquered Caledonia to be like, all right, yeah, but we know realistically where our writ goes. Same thing with the Middle East. That didn't happen. He held it. He held North Africa until the Mamelukes rebelled like centuries later. He held the Caucasus for a while. So yeah, I got to give it to Selim the Grim, even though not a lot of fun at parties. Didn't last very long. Got owned by his kid, very poetically. This is an interesting question. Somebody says, was Charles Bronson the best actor to get pigeonholed in a reactionary action movie? One, it's a good question because I'm trying to think of other people who fit that description. Who else is like a reactionary movie star? Charles Bronson, definitely. John Wayne, yeah. Who else? Are there any other, like, Clint Eastwood, I think, yeah. Not, like, more thoughtfully, obviously. Like, he is, like, Eastwood is clearly, like, a more progressive figure than John Wayne was. In every sense. Like, John Wayne was a very hypocritical decency monger, and Eastwood was much more of a California guy, like a swinging 60s dude. Ask Sandra Locke; she'll tell you, or she could have before she died. But anyway, it was the same. It was the same values, like just modified, given like the dissolution of the social mores that it held under Wayne, like recognizing the difference in culture. But who else? Who else? And then Bronson is sort of like the caveman version of that. Like Bronson is the unreconstructed chunk. Like if Eastwood is the all right, this is interesting because they emerged around the same time as like stars, 70s, 80s, Death Wish and Dirty Harry. And Dirty Harry is the civilized Eastwood. Wayne. It's John Wayne's American civilized and John Wayne's American synthesizing modernity. Like that's what Eastwood was. That's what Dirty Harry was. Bronson, Kersey, was that slug, was the reactionary slug, the excess that had to get jettisoned to create Eastwood. So that's what the Death Wish movies were, and of course, I mean then that follows too because Dirty Harry is an actual police officer, and he never actually does anything in the movies that's illegal. He's tough. And of course, like liberals and like tourneys and elite types might say what he's doing is wrong, but he doesn't break the law unless he very absolutely has to, and always in the service of greater good. Bronson is explicitly a vigilante who is not a cop, does not abide by laws, murders people with impunity, like a guy who was the villain in a Dirty Harry movie. The bad guys in, I believe it's Magnum Force, are cops, Tim Matheson, a young Tim Matheson as the ringleader, who are killing bad guys secretly. They murder an evil pimp and pornographers and stuff. And Dirty Harry kills them all. He's putting it back in the container. You know, it's like these are the restraints that we need for a stable masculinity that can still persist at the top of the economic, like that's totally accepted because we're not challenging that. This is all about a cultural reconfiguration. Power will still be distributed as it always has. Money will still be distributed as it always has. Excess surplus, to put it in the most blunt terms, surplus will be distributed as it always has. So that's all taken care of. The question is, where do we fit on the stagecoach? Like, where are we on the stagecoach? And you know, John Wayne, he's got to be in Shotgun. Fuck you. That's the only spot for him. Women, and like drunk Indians in the actual stagecoach. I'm up here with the Shotgun. Eastwood's like, maybe I'm in the back. Maybe give the girl a gun. That's funny. She's in bloomers and she's got a double barrel like Aunt May. Little corncob pipe. So it's all about like where you can like feel comfortable on the cart as it continues, you know, exploiting and expropriating and hyper exploiting and creating surpluses that are turned into these cultural curios and artifacts that you can value more or less based on your individual tastes, which are of course all determined by the culture that produces them. Blah blah blah. And so the synthesis, the police state, harbingered by Dirty Harry, comes into being. The carceral state we know as now, the tough on crime, war on drugs, American police state, and carceral state to go along with it, because you're arresting these people. What could I be doing to you? Like, that's the real thing. It's like, yes, we're still keeping the lines of property, and we're still enforcing them arbitrarily to the benefit of accumulated just heredity, basically, dressed up with different words, but heredity, total, just something that is clearly wrong, that cries out for redress in the heart of any, like, a human being. So it has to be countermanded, which is what culture is there to help do. So yeah, so that creates Harry Callahan and the civilized masculine dominance, but that leaves the excess, and that's Bernie Goetz, and that's John Kersey, and that's Charles Bronson. Boom. He is the cast-off slug of unreconstructed Neanderthal white male masculinity that must be discarded if one is to create a synthesis. Now the problem is there's so much other shit in the gears that deal didn't work out as smoothly as anybody on any part of it thought it would, and that means that all of the detritus, the throw-off, the runoff, the stuff that's endemic to any kind of mechanism. I mean, graft and shit builds up in the pipes of a car engine, same with carbon and things build up, same thing as that. So yeah, Bronson. He is really he's the last like right-wing action star, because I feel like for the most part, like mainstream culture, to the degree that you're going to get the benefit of a budget that's going to get you talked about as in our understanding of what like constitutes like a mass culture, like at the level of a Seagal or something. I think politics has been suppressed. I think like we're seeing like Trump kind of represents this excess, this like cultural these tension zones that are unresolved, that are supposed to be resolved by the market. Honestly, they're supposed to get paid off for. You're supposed to bribe them into being. Those bribes aren't happening anymore because there's not enough money to make the payoffs, because the system isn't producing them. And this all started in the 70s with the stagflation crisis, the energy crisis, the profitability crisis of capitalism that has been in since. That's the only way to understand the last 40 years of politics. Is one crisis that has been in persistence since then. And in America, in the short-term domestic politics sense, the way that's been resolved, the crisis has been resolved through short-term bubble inflations. Defense industry in the 80s, tech in the 90s, but when that gets disrupted, there's no more. The money's got to come from somewhere, and it came from labor working. It came from the money that had to come from somewhere, because the money in this case meaning profit. It's like either we're losing profit or we're getting it else from somewhere else. And the first obvious answer was from labor, and so that's what they started doing. And from labor, in the cultural terms, means the people who are supposed to be signing off on all these cultural arrangements. And the thing that makes those trade-offs acceptable is that they are accommodated. They come with material raises and circumstances that make those kind of cultural things matter less, because you're comfortable. Shit like that matters more to the degree to which you're in, you're in general pain. Your life is generally constrained and defined by lack and by fear and like all negative emotions. Like if you the degree to which your life is like determined by those is the degree to which like things like that matter, because it's literally all it's like everything is in front of you and it's the only thing that matters. You can feel more magnanimously, the degree to which things are more comfortable. And so as that lubricant, as the material lubricant went away, because like that process had been happening, like all these like, oh, look at every single person who like does a meme where they show, look at how cool guys back then were, and they were all masculine and alpha. If you went back then, older guys were saying, look at these fucking pussies, look at these fucking pussies. These guys used to be cool. You can go back literally to ancient Rome and see that. Because it's an inherent process. It's a civilizational process. It's a dialect for fucking. It's dialectical. Just if you understand it as that, it gets robbed of a lot of the emotional stuff that makes it so hard. Honestly, like that to sound. I don't want to be like, hey man, get over it, but like, get dialectical. And a lot of this stuff doesn't really. How do you even care? Of course, like, yes, this is all based on the back of hyper-exploitation elsewhere. It's just that it was distributed among the top level more equitably. And there's nothing virtuous about any of this. And this is the thing that needs to get understood, and that people, because the thing is, this is all we're talking about, all this language, and our understanding of third world exploitation, all those things are only consumed and metabolized by liberal subjects, by people at the top of this fucking food chain. So they have to rationalize it somehow. It's built in. So that's why, if you think of it dialectically, man, it's hard to get too wrapped up in any of this shit. But then that's because you're comfortable. But what I'm saying, anyway, this is all about how. What I mean by that is that, like, if the people who are on the bottom, if they were on the top, they wouldn't be good by virtue of the fact that they used to be on the bottom. They would still suck. They'd be bad because they'd be exploiting. The fact that they were suffering would not make them exploiting good. And that is a fundamental misunderstanding that undergirds like 90% of surface level understanding of things like identity politics and privilege theory. It's all based on the idea that it would be better if someone who was oppressed does an oppression. And I think that's wrong, and I don't agree with that. And I feel like if you don't accept that as a beginning principle, it can undermine your entire approach to politics. But anyway, all this is just to mean is that the reason that these things are thrown off your Elliot Rogerses and your Pepes and your little creepy anhedonic little toadlet class. It's because you can't buy them off anymore, because it's not. You can't give. It's not because we changed culturally. It's because it's no longer. You literally can't have a one-family household. You're going to have 2 parents, 3 kids. I mean, forget that. Forget all that. Even forget like the mid-century, consumer aspect of it. Even if you said no, I don't even need a lawn. I don't need all that bullshit that was really all Madison Avenue's brainwashing. It was not actually part of any traditional lifestyle. If you throw that away and say, I just want to be able to raise a family on an income, you couldn't do it. It's impossible. So it creates new things about that. And one of them is that actually women, it's good. It's not only is it good to work, no, you don't have to work. Actually, it's great that you should work. And it's empowering. And not only is it empowering, it's the only place to get genuine worth. Congratulations. But it's all because there was no more, because they got it from labor, because they couldn't get it from the market anymore, because of things like the energy crisis, the change in the energy market. Anyway, so it was defense in the night, Reagan, and then there was the first dot-com bubble, which happened before 9/11, which then coincidentally and very happily for some people created a new sort of Keynesian military budget justification to do like an 80s defense build-up again, on top of which you did another speculative housing bubble and a speculative tech bubble, both of course embedded in the spending created and the network of companies and budgets and that created by the war on terror. And that, yeah. So there you go. Whew. Wow. I mean, the thing is, none of this is really mind-blowing or anything. This is all pretty self-explanatory. But it's also hard to put together, man, because they really don't want you to think of it all together. They want you to think of it all as discrete little questions. And then you can have discrete good guys and bad guys. And then you can have discrete personal investments and emotional attachments that can accrue to one or the other. And then over time, you can confuse your sympathy in a situation with some objective moral stance, or more importantly, an objective like material insistence. Not the same thing. Bronson was a good actor. I mean, come on, he was the last. But anyway, yeah. So like a guy like Bronson now couldn't be a movie star. A guy like Bronson now would have to be like a YouTube guy, or more realistic. I mean, realistically, he wouldn't be an actor at all. He'd be a fucking steelworker, or he'd be an out of work steelworker. He'd have like 2 kids with fentanyl addictions, and he would be a part-time Walmart greeter. With a fucking, who's end stage alcoholic. That would be the reality of the Mr. Majestic Charles Bronson, if he would, like, the version of him now. But if there was a cultural version of him now, it would be just like as an echo of him, as like a crude puppet created by his like his slightly better off suburban failed nephews and stuff, like holding up these like literally like dead. Like Day of the Dead, giant puppets. Like that's the real, like their grandparents' shirts, filling them up with what at the end of the day is just pure fantasy of that something regurgitate that they are only building out of. Like it's a thing. They're literally making a effigy. They're making an effigy of like their fathers, out of. Like the bone meal spit out by the machine. But they are, whatever that would be, whatever disgusting bone meal and spit mummy would come out of that process. It would be a YouTube guy, or it would be a school shooter, or I don't know. It would not have impriture. That's what it basically means. It would have to be unspoken of. It would have to be the subaltern. And it would have to be destroyed. But the thing is that it's going to keep... Conflict is never going to end, because the source of the conflict is the increased friction. And you're not going to... Unless you're going to grease up... You've got to grease it up, and there's no grease. Spit on your hand, there's nothing. And so it's just going to keep spraying unless you literally change the fundamental like network. Problem is that the way you get to do that is by organizing people who are all cast-off chunklets made by this fucking machine in the first place. It's tough. It's all stuff that makes you go, honestly. I love that Felix is doing NBC. If you'd sold me when this whole started, all right, what is Quarantine Felix going to get into? Because I know he would do relatively well, like you can tell who's doing better or worse in quarantine is largely the degree to which they were doing better or worse beforehand, and the worse they were doing, the better they're probably doing in quarantine, and vice versa. And since Felix was always sort of in a crisis state, just like kind of anhedonic, and then needing like short-term fixations to sort of stimulate enough interest in him to keep like thinking life is like going through. He's talked about this on the show, the dance between meaning and novelty, and so it's always going to spin on something. It's like Barstool Sports or 12-year-old YouTube kids or whatever, landing on NBC primetime shows. Didn't see that one coming, but I'm glad he has it, and I'm glad he's having a good time. Like for me, doing these has been my thing. And it's been very helpful, because I was, like, a couple weeks in, I was starting to feel the flywheels coming off. And this is, like, helped, because, like, I don't think I've gone, I literally have lost track of and when I think of, like, how long I've been doing any one thing, I don't know, man. It just feels like I've been in a tunnel this entire time. It just feels like I've been in a gigantic tunnel. Just, like, standing here this entire time. So I have no idea. what time or place is. But I don't think I've missed one of these in. I mean, I might not have put them all on YouTube, but I don't think I've missed doing one for at least like half an hour, for weeks. And I'm hoping to do it for the rest of the quarantine time, and maybe turn into something after that. I don't know. But short term, what I want to do is put it on Twitch, which I need a little bit more help with the computer shit to do. But once we've got it figured out, this will be coming to Twitch, which will be great. More interaction and stuff, and it'll like be easier to put onto YouTube, because apparently it's kind of annoying that for Chris to get these off of here and put on YouTube. I could be doing that, but don't yell at me. I'm an old man. I don't understand such things. You get in my ear, you talk about the button and the thing. I can't download things. I don't know. People like, I was complaining about how your computer hears you say you want to see a movie, or it sees you type, hey, look, hey, have you seen that in a while? And then it goes into your streaming services and it removes them from the queue, so you have to purchase them or rent them. 100% believe that's true, and I've had enough people like say something like that happen to them to make me think, yeah, that's true. What was I saying? Shit, I forgot what that meant. But yeah, no, they're doing that. They're doing that to us. The thing is, there's no escape. You know, it's like, oh no, don't go on Twitch. It's like, yeah, but here I am on Instagram. It's all just one giant throbbing tunnel that we're all being fed into. Here it is. That's all there is. Hello. Hello. I see you. Alright guys, see you tomorrow. Stay safe. Stay sane.